Economist Professor Godfred Walken is joining me via Zoom for more on this development. Thanks so much for your time this evening, Prof. And if you can hear me, we know the cedi is trading around 5 cedis 82 pesos as of today. And you heard what the Vice President is saying, that despite the external factors that we have, the cedi has been fairly stable. If you can hear me, what is your assessment of the cedi's performance so far? Looks like we don't have Professor Godfred Walken on the phone lines yet, but we'll try and work the phone lines, and when we get to him, he will answer all those questions about his assessment of the Ghana cedi, as being said by the Vice President, that it's been fairly stabilized by government. But when we get him, we'll bring him back on the line. But moving away from that, all right, so I want to revisit our earlier story about the performance of the cedi, and I have been joined on Zoom by Professor Godfred Walken. He is an economist. Thanks so much for having you this evening, Prof. And if you can hear me clearly, I was saying that the cedi is actually trading around 5 cedis 82 pesos today. And the Vice President is saying that despite the external pressures on the cedi, we've prudently stabilized the cedi. What is your independent assessment of the cedi's performance?
Thank you very much, and good evening to our cherished viewers. I think that the development this year is very, very welcoming. We can take the politics out of it, and then say that I think that there's a strategy underlining this performance that we cannot take away from the managers of the economy and also Bank of Ghana, building towards the end of last year when Bank of Ghana had been building its reserves in anticipation of 2020 also being an election year. And to that extent, and again, when you look at COVID-19, the slowdown in import, of course, export also, things are working some way, somehow, of course, driven also by the strategy, and to some extent, you can't take the fund.
Hello, Prof.
So that is what is playing out. The reason, yes.
Yes, go ahead, Prof. I can hear you now. Prof, if you can hear me, you can go ahead with your submission, please. All right, it looks like technology is failing us today, but we'll try and work the lines and get back to talk about the performance of the cedi. And so you were making a submission about why we are here, especially when we have some external factors putting so much pressure on the cedi.
Okay, thank you very much, and apologies for the internet connectivity we had earlier.
Accepted.
So, like I was saying, so if you look at even from the beginning of the year, before COVID-19 really showed its ugly head in our part of the world, you could see the performance of the cedi, and you can trace it to some underlying strategy. One is the fact that Bank of Ghana has been intense now building its international reserves in anticipation of 2020 election. Because usually during an election year, the cedi comes under some cumulative pressure, and that becomes an election campaign issue. So that is clear. But of course, when you also look at the slowdown or generally the disruption in the global supply chain, which is also affecting import, but also affecting export. But then you have to look at the balance of where the impact is, and that may also be showing up in the performance of the cedi. But more importantly, if you look at the drop in global interest rates because of some quantitative easing, and then particularly the effect, the containment measures to COVID-19, interest rates are particularly low. And for that reason, those investors who normally will seek early redemption of their investment from Ghana, for which reason could cause the cedi to depreciate, that has also slowed to some extent. Let's also remember that Bank of Ghana has received some inflows to its international reserves from the IMF rapid credit facility and other support. That is also showing up the stability of the cedi.
Right.
So we will say that there's some underlining to this, and of course you can't take the fundamentals of the economy out of the discussion also. So, but what I want to talk about more importantly is the fact that this is good news for Ghana. Why am I saying so? Because when the cedi is stable, it's good for all of us, regardless of which party you belong to. But more importantly, you realize that any time the cedi depreciates, it also adds to our public debt stock. So when you look at 2019 alone, because 2019, the cedi depreciated, it was one of the worst performing currencies in Sub-Saharan Africa. And that alone added positive 15 billion cedi to our debt stock. So our debt stock went up in 2019 by approximately 15 billion, not because we first debt, but it was simply devaluation of the currency, of course, along the major currencies, the dollar, the sterling, the euro. But if you look at the composition of our debt stock, majority of them are denominated in dollars. So anytime the cedi depreciates hugely against the dollar, it tends to also affect our public debt buildup. So that is how we can talk about it. But the outlook looks fairly stable to some extent.
All right.
To some extent.
And so, I mean, clearly justify the Vice President's position that we've done quite well in stabilizing the cedi. But you spoke about the general global slowdown. Are we out of the woods yet? And for how long do you think that we can come back to a normal position with the management of the economy?
Wow. Even when restrictions are lifted, it takes a while for things to come to prepare. So should be patient in terms of the recovery. And even in Ghana, we ease them in terms of public gathering and all of that. It will take a while for people to actually respond appropriately. All right, Prof. To pandemic level.
All right, Prof. Unfortunately, we have to leave it here. Technology was not good to us today, but I want to say a big thank you.